New studies show cancer is on the rise in younger generations. Doctors say in some cases there could be a connection with unhealthy lifestyles. Researchers from the American Cancer Society and the University of Calgary find 23 million patients have been diagnosed with cancer since 2000. WIFR reporter Adalia Young talks with experts on what this means for the health system.
In a report published in the Lancet Public Health, 17 types of cancers are 3 times higher in Gen X and millennials. I spoke with the American Cancer Society, which helped with the report, and what this could mean for younger generations.
And that could be affecting them during their crucial developmental years.
Colon, pancreatic, and uterine are just a few of the types of cancers on the rise in our younger generations. Experts say there are no specific reasons for the increase, but share 4 possible factors.
There are 4 factors that we know may be crucial, and especially these population groups share unique social, economic, political, and climate environments, and that could be affecting them during their crucial developmental years.
Doctors also point to prior studies that partially blame obesity for the rise in certain types of the disease.
I believe it's the processed food and leading a sedentary lifestyle, which can lead us to the comorbidities of diabetes, obesity, and of course, leads to cancer down the road.
The American Cancer Society does recommend a few tips for parents. Keep children up to date on their HPV shots and push a healthier lifestyle.
Can actually help prevent up to 90% of cervical cancer incidences and other cancer incidents as well. And that is available for our upper elementary school, middle school aged children, that they can get this HPV vaccine in a series of shots and help prevent the potential incidence of cancer rates.
Low sugar, fruits and vegetables, exercise, and drinking plenty of water will decrease the risk of cancer.
While some cancers are on the rise, others are declining. Evidence shows the HPV vaccine is the leading cause of the decrease in cervical cancer. Schedule an appointment with a pediatrician to keep your family up to date.
Doctors have decreased age limits for cancer screenings for the last few years to catch signs early. If you have a family history of cancer or have concerns, talk to a doctor to discuss whether screening is the best path for you.